All right, guys, welcome back to the Sex and Bacon podcast. On today's episode, I have with me the amazing Dr. Casey and Kari Sanders. And I'm really excited for this interview just because I've listened to a bunch of your guys' stuff. And I think, we think a lot alike and say things kind of the same. So today we're going to talk about a couple different things. So we're going to talk about opening up long-term relationships into new sexual frontiers. I'm kind of curious to see what the 3 C's of a successful sex life are. And then going from monogamish, I think I said that monogamous to I'm not even going to say
Mish.
that correctly.
It's not an easy
Monogamish.
nation.
I'm going to butcher that one. So, yeah, let's dive into this. I'm really curious to see because I read your guys' history, your background of kind of how you guys got into podcasting and
Oh
sharing
yeah.
about sex and sexual experiences and helping people. So, yeah, do you want to introduce yourselves a little bit and kind of give some backstory on that?
Yeah, for sure. You want to go ahead and get this started?
Yeah, I'll go first. So yes, my name is Kari Sanders, and I am actually a hairdresser on the side. Been doing hair for 14 years now, and I will be honest, that's kind of what started a lot of my like sexual conversations because I work with women and I work on women,
Mm-hmm.
and inevitably I'm working on them for 4 hours. I mean, what else are we gonna talk about? So sex just ended up becoming like a huge aspect of my daily conversation. And then I would come home and I would talk to Casey about it. And then we
Mm-hmm.
started exploring further with it. And then we started to notice that amongst all of our friend groups, we were the ones bringing up sex. We were the ones asking about big dicks or not. Like, and so it just kind of became this vendetta for us. Like, this is beneficial. So, how can we further this
Mm-hmm.
even more? And for anyone that has heard a little bit of our podcast, I've been sex positive since like birth. It's always been something I've been interested
Mhm.
in. I've always been more fluid with it. I've always been very accepting to it,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was just lucky enough to get with a partner that felt the same way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Oh man, I love these questions. They provided the opportunity to just kind of dive into, like you said, what we've been through over the
yeah.
last 14 years together. And in the same sense, I'm the kid, just like so many out there have been in the past. 2 a.m. watching Real Sex on HBO and listening to episodes of Dr. Ruth and just completely engulfed in all things sex. And it took me up until me and Carrie had been together for so long that I realized that I could actually make a career out of it if I chose to.
Mm-hmm.
It never even occurred to me, and that kind of was a little bit of shift in perspective. So we talked about it. As Carrie said, we had conversations, our friend circles, we were always talking about fucking, we were always talking
Mhm.
about sex. We were helping our friends through like sexual problems and how to do certain things. And we started looking at it from the perspective of, well, if this is working so well for our friend groups, if this is working so well for the people around us and for her clients and
Mhm.
then for my patients, why are we not trying to reach more people? And
Mm-hmm.
so we dove right in. Let's
Yeah.
make a podcast. Let's do one of the easiest things to get started and one of the hardest things to maintain, and just try to spread this message of sex
Mm-hmm.
positivity
Yeah.
and how to have good sex throughout your entire marriage. And it's been a massively fun thing to do over the past about
Mm-hmm.
year.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you find that your guys' friend group though was you were already surrounded by very open-minded people, or was it kind of because you guys were so open-minded and so open that it was just you allowed them to be comfortable to kind of go down that road, or was it kind of one of those things where it's like you're the odd couple out in the friend group of like, oh yeah, like they talk about those things, they do those weird things, and you know
Mm.
I'm gonna lead with that we live in Texas. You know, we're not the most like open, and
yeah,
so I would go with the first. No, we
okay,
were the ones that were like bringing up the conversation. We and it at first and with some people was not always met positively. I
Yeah.
mean, we've
mm-hmm.
definitely had people that were like, oh, okay, well, let's shift the conversation back. And even down to some of our close circles. I mean, even some of our family, they're like, I can't believe y'all are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But if anything, that's actually to me just means that what we're doing is on the right path. Because if there is backlash to just talking about sex in today's age, then this is why it's needed. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be blushing about saying blowjob. We shouldn't be blushing about talking about butt plugs and anal. Like, it's just silly. Like, we're grown ass
Yeah.
people. And even in the group that we have, Yeah, we've definitely had a little bit of backlash for it. I mean, what would you say? Do you agree? Do you kind
I,
of see both sides of it a little bit?
I'm gonna call it both sides on this. I'm gonna have a slight disagreement on this one
Hmm.
because we exist in two different social circles. We have
Mhm.
our like high end conservative side of people that we do hang out with in these some of these social circles that are more like socially conservative.
Hmm.
And so talking about these things with them and bringing it up in conversation, you see get that little bit of like closed off, arms crossed, maybe looking for an exit type of personality come into
Mhm.
play. And then we have our other side of friends, and these are people who are like sexually liberated, open-minded people who could just dive into the
Yeah.
conversation. So it's almost like we have this fun ability to just kind of shift through these different social landscapes. So I think we've experienced from all angles. People that
Okay.
are really
Hmm.
into it and really love talking about it, and people who will talk about it behind closed doors, but out in actual open conversation, they're fairly closed off to it.
Okay. Because I do find that I feel like women, typically, this is something that we talk about in our friend groups a little bit more, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
tend to be a
Hmm.
little bit more open, sharing. But men, I've always found, tend to be the ones who are a little bit more closed off about it. And the ones that maybe are a little more judgy towards the women who are talking about it openly. Like women still get that the name calling of she's a slut, she's a whore,
Hmm.
Yeah.
she's filthy when we're talking about sex, and especially from men who aren't
Mm-hmm.
open. Like, so for, I guess for you being a man and in your friend circles, where do you think that comes from? Men who really struggle to be open with their sexuality
Oh
and
yeah.
not judgmental towards the men and women who are. Where do you think that stems from?
Oh, I love that question. This is one that I've contemplated a lot because I am one of the guys that like one of my core values is like let's normalize talking about our
Mhm.
penises together. I think it's important to have some of these conversations and to normalize it. I think that a lot of it stems from social grooming that we come up.
Okay.
A lot of it comes from toxic masculinity. As a cis hetero man growing up, what am I told, right? I'm told that we keep a lot of this behind closed doors. We don't talk
Mhm.
about our sexual conquests. If you look in a lot of social circles with men in these short term relationships, one night stands, and things like that, they'll talk about that all day long. They'll talk about what the sex was like. They'll talk about what her body was like, all that. But the second that it shifts into a longer term relationship, it becomes almost like they covet the person. There's almost like this sense of property behind it, which is so fucking outdated way of thinking. And
Mhm.
now a guy's sitting about going, no, I don't talk about that. I'm not going to talk about her and what we do behind closed doors because that's for me and me alone. And they huddle to that. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of it does stem from just that. It's how we are brought up. It's
Hmm.
what we've been exposed to through our parents. It's what we've been exposed through our close social circles, through religious circles that people tend to travel through. All of that combines into this worldview about how a man should act whenever it comes to talking about sex. And I think it's time for that to change.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really nice if it did, right? And I know being up here in Canada that we are a very closed-minded society. Some parts more than others, but I grew up with it and it just felt like it was one of those things where it's like the culture around sex has not shifted from the time that I was a little girl to now being in my 40s. It's still one of those
Hmm.
things where, to have the open conversations, you are the one pegged in the group as like the slut or the whore because you can
Hmm.
Yeah,
openly talk about blowjobs and sizes or what position you like. And, like, and I find I thought it was really sad because it's just like, these are very important things to the point that they ruin relationships. Marriages will end
Hmm.
over, bad sex lives and mismatched sex drives because nobody's willing to just dive deep into those personal conversations. And if you could normalize the conversation, I feel like a lot of things could be resolved through that open communication in a safe space, and yet we still condemn people for doing it.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. I mean, I remember even a time when I was in college. And so, one thing I didn't necessarily bring up, but my original goal growing up, I wanted to be a sex therapist. That's what I
Mhm.
wanted. Like, I was dead set. I was in a sexual health class, and me and a girl were discussing blowjobs. And I got in trouble. in our sexual class for discussing blowjobs. It wasn't in the middle class, it was early
Mm-hmm.
on. And then later I ended up finding out that it was a guy behind us that I made him uncomfortable because we were talking about it. And I'm like, I'm I'm sorry. I thought that this was the place that we could talk about this stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember even my teacher pulling me aside and being like, you know, as a lady, you just have to like watch what you say. And I'm like, first of all, I never said I was a lady. I'm a woman. I'm not a lady. There's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And like I thought that this is where we could. And
Yeah.
even then, like being in that exact setting that you feel would be the safest, there was still backlash. So I agree. There needs to be this like shift in understanding what sex is. And it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what gender you are, anyone should be able to talk about sex.
Absolutely, especially because we all like it in a very different way. I mean, there's not
Hmm.
one
Yeah.
standard way to give a blowjob. And if we all have this idea that all men like blowjobs in this exact way, you have a lot of dissatisfied men out there and a lot of women who are confused as to what they're doing. And then they're scared to bring it up. The guy's scared to bring it up.
Hmm.
And we just go back into these shells of like, fearful around the topic and fearful and insecure about what it is we're doing when we're in the bedroom, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting, and like point to what you were just saying is that you were in a class discussing blowjobs with a girl,
Hmm.
and you were told don't talk about that because it made a guy uncomfortable. If that's not like
Mhm.
the keystone of a patriarchal society, of someone being like, "Hey, listen, you made him uncomfortable, so you need to change the way you do things."
Yeah,
As a
so
part
you're the
two,
problem.
instead of
Yeah,
he's uncomfortable, so fucking remove yourself from the situation, man. Like
Yeah.
walk away from the conversation.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's really what it should be is like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm not used to these kind of conversations. They make me uncomfortable, but why do they make me uncomfortable? What is it that I'm
Yes.
afraid of? Or what was it that I was taught growing up that makes this conversation create uneasy feelings inside of me? Because you shouldn't. You things
Yeah.
This is our bodies, this is our lives. We essentially start having sex from the time some people from the time they're 13 onwards of into their 70s. That's a really long time to be sexually active and intimate and to be exploring yourselves. And if we can't even do that in a comfortable way, how do you expect to, you know, actually be a person who's enjoying that with your partner? I mean, I know some
Exactly.
women that are in their 50s that have never had an orgasm from a man yet, and they're
Hmm.
still scared to have those conversations, you
Yeah.
know? But
100%. I was actually, it's so funny. I was on the phone with my mom the other day and I was talking to her. Yes, my mom. And I was talking
mhm,
to her about when was the last time y'all had sex, my mom and my dad. And she was like, oh, whatever. I'm not going to go into her whole story, but she was telling me it had been a minute. And I'm at work, you know, and I'm in front of my friends and I get off the phone and they're like, who was that? I was like, my mom. They're like, that was your mom? You were talking to your mom? And I'm like, what does it matter? Like, sex is sex. We're humans. Like, we all have
mhm,
needs. If my best friend isn't getting laid to my mom's not getting laid, I don't care who it is. I'm going to help
yeah,
you out. I'm going to talk to you about it because that's what helped me too. Like, I enjoy being able to be that voice when
mhm,
someone doesn't have it, you know, or
yeah,
someone doesn't even recognize that they need it. And so
yeah.
I don't feel like there's any situation, truthfully, where sex shouldn't be at least a discussion.
Hmm.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that actually for men and for women, having those conversations, I mean, there's certain things that even now, like I've been very sexually open my whole life and same thing. I love talking about it. And I've worked normal jobs where, I've been talking to people that I've worked with, men and women, mostly men. And, like other staff will be like, how did you find that out about them? I'm like, I don't know. We were just having a conversation. They're like, how is it that every conversation you have with people turns sexual? And I was like, I don't
Same.
know. People are just
Same.
comfortable, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. When you
don't
open
know what
that
to
door,
tell
they want
you.
to enter it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
people secretly want to talk about it, but they just don't know
Yeah.
how to even jumpstart the conversation. And that was another
Totally.
reason for this podcast for us
Yeah.
specifically is like we love to say that we're educationally raunchy and for a
Hmm.
reason. We're there to instruct you, give you information, give you insight to something that you never even knew existed in a really fun and raunchy way. So then maybe it will like click or it will open that door and
Right.
allow you to explore yourself or your partner in a way that you just never would have even thought about doing.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Some of our best feedback has been from people that'll say, we'll have a wife or somebody that's in the bath and she'll say she listens to our podcast while soaking in the tub, and all of a sudden you'll see like her husband's head pop around the corner, all interested, like, what is it you're listening to? And
Hmm.
from that stems people giving us feedback of, no, me and my husband listen to your show every single Friday whenever it comes out. We
Mm-hmm.
love it, and it's
Yeah.
allowed us to open our conversations.
Yep.
Totally. I think people need that. People need that gateway, that bridge that like kind of almost helps them come
Yes.
together to have those conversations. And the more information, education, and content that's out there that they can hear other people having those conversations, I think it does kind of like plant that seed inside of their minds that like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I can talk about this. I didn't maybe know how to bring it up, but from listening to other people talk about it, it kind of gives them that, the tools to go about having these conversations in a way that makes it more comfortable for them, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into the 3 C's of a successful sex life. What are these?
Oh God, I love these. We try to bring these up on every single episode.
Mm-hmm.
Every sex life, every marriage, every relationship, no
Every
matter how many
relationship.
people
Yeah.
it's with, we feel strongly require 3 key elements in order to have some of the best sex they could possibly have. Those namely being consent,
Hmm.
communication, and comfortability.
Yep.
Okay.
All three of these things, when put together, are going to just explode your sex life
Hmm.
in just a wave of pleasure.
Well,
So,
and it
Yeah.
can excel a conversation in a way that, or explore a conversation in a way that you haven't really understood in the past. An example, say pegging. Let's just go there, right? I need to communicate to my husband that I want to peg him. Now, I bring it up to him, and
mhm.
then I need to have put it in a comfortable situation, like, hey, let's break down these walls, let's be comfortable with one another, let's communicate with one another. And then now the next thing I would need to gain would be consent. Now I already
Hmm.
know my husband, and he's not going to consent to this. However, if I break down those 3 categories into expressing what I want,
Hmm.
making sure that the atmosphere is available to or for me to express that, and again, the comfort also comes with the act while it's happening too. But again, if I can communicate what I want, I can give it a comfortable environment, and then I get that consent,
Hmm.
everything can kind of evolve from those 3 things, and then you can explore further into what it is and what it is that y'all want.
Yeah.
Okay. I
I
like that.
definitely
That
It's
think
like,
that
makes
you should.
sense.
yeah, it's like it's as simple as it, and it's as complicated as that. And we've taken hour long episodes to go into each individual topic. I mean, for us, we all know that consent is not a
Hmm.
single thing. It's not a one time thing.
Mhm.
We've talked with people who have had consent issues far into their marriage. So we try to discuss them what consent actually means and how to use it effectively in your relationship. I think that too many people go through and think that once they get an I do, or once they're in a committed relationship,
Hmm.
that there's an automatic assumed consent. And then they
Mhm.
have this entitled feeling like I should be able to get sex when I want.
Mhm.
And if I don't get it, I'm going to get mad about it. And if you don't do it, then I'm just going to get further mad about it. And now we have a problem, as opposed to trying to work for it and seek
Right.
that permission, that enthusiastic and voluntary yes, fuck
Mhm.
me, that we want to
Yeah.
hear.
Well, and then I think
Okay.
the beauty of it too was one of the big takeaways was also the right to revoke consent.
Yeah.
And that
Right.
was something that a lot of people, when we finished that episode out, that was some of the biggest questions that we had after was, oh, wait a minute, you're allowed to do that? You're allowed to say yes and then say no. And
Hmm.
even for women, I, it was kind of shocking to me, truthfully, to hear women say that they didn't know that they could do that. And I'm like, yeah, girl, like you're into it and then you're not. That's
Hmm.
okay. Like, and to be able to express that. And then again, if you can communicate and then your partner has the ability to accept it, that's one of the biggest things that we love about these 3 C's is they're in any category, in any subject, in any moment, those 3 C's can be put to place. And
Right.
I mean, it's one of the biggest reasons why our relationship has evolved the way that it has, because he's always given me a safe place to come to him to explain the things that I want. And then that consent can kind of fall in between each one of those.
I could see though. It's funny when you guys first said like consent, communication, and the comfortability. At first, I was like, oh, well, consent's like the easy one. But then as you continue to explain that, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, I was like, wait, I was like, I've done that. Like, I'm a pleaser, so in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, maybe something that like I was into one time or at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of like an experience. all of a sudden isn't working for me anymore. And I'll think that in my mind, but then I'm like, oh, but don't say anything because I don't want to ruin his enjoyment. And like, oh, that's fine, like whatever, it's, I know he wants it, so I'll just do it for
Mm-hmm.
him. And like I have a hard time vocalizing that like I no longer like this and I no longer want
Mm-hmm.
to do this. So
Mm,
you're right in that aspect. I could see that that would be such a hard thing when you really dive into the layers of it. It isn't just as simple as like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. There's
Mm-hmm.
way more that goes into that. So it's
yes.
funny as you explained that, I was like, oh, okay, I obviously struggle with that, and taking it back,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's what happens whenever we continue to look at the longer term relationships, is that if consent is assumed and then you
Mm-hmm.
just continue to do these things, like let's call it, for an example, say that you have one time where your spouse gives you consent to do like this big production of a blowjob, deep throating and like gagging and
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of stuff. And he's really into it. It was a one time thing, and now she's not super into it, and he's wanting to do it again and again and again. She's not really into it. She's not great okay with it, but she keeps letting it happen. And now we start having resentment in the relationship, and now we start having a further wedge in the sex life.
Mm-hmm.
So arousal is harder to achieve, and we're starting to get to a point where sex is starting to die off, and both of them are sitting back wondering why their sex life is being destroyed.
But then again, that
Right.
falls right with our three C's. If, say, this partner is feeling that way, but is not communicating that,
Mm-hmm.
then the spouse is left wondering why. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying these three really go hand in hand. Because again, if she's doing all this gagging and deep throating, that's a production, right?
Yeah.
Um, I've done that. There's truthfully not a lot of comfort
Yeah.
when you're doing
Yeah.
that, like it's fun in the moment.
Yeah.
But those three C's do have to be represented. And that's again, like it's not just with sex. It's not.
Yeah.
We use
Mm-hmm.
that with our daily life, with our communication. I don't care if it's like, hey babe, I want some tacos. Will you consent to getting me some damn tacos? I'm
Yeah.
communicating it. I'm getting the consent for those tacos. I'm going to be pretty damn comfortable sitting in that restaurant getting those
Yeah.
tacos. Like it's not just sex. And that's the thing that we really try to get people to understand is these three C's you can use in almost every category in your relationship. Think about having an argument with your partner. You put
Mm-hmm.
those three C's in the back of your head. Do you have consent to have that argument?
Yeah.
Right? Like that
Is this a good time?
is this a good time? Are we in a
Yeah.
comfortable scenario to where we can sit down and communicate? So
Yeah.
the three C's for us are huge, and they can really dive in to every aspect of your relationship.
Absolutely. I could see that. I do think, and I mean, from personal experience and conversations, I do think communication is one of the biggest things that couples struggle with. And you're
Yes.
right, not even just in like the bedroom, it's in all aspects of a
Yeah.
relationship. But I found through having conversations and a lot of interviews with men and women that were in the lifestyle, it
Hmm.
seemed like be in order to be in a polyamorous relationship, in order to have an open relationship, in order to be a swinger, your communication has to be so beyond fine tuned that
100%.
it seems to just trickle over into every other area of the relationship. And it's like, if we can navigate this, tricky situation, this tricky dynamic, and we can actually break down those barriers and communicate so well with each other that there's nothing left to, leave somebody curious about. It just naturally, everything else just falls into place of like, you can communicate because you've done it in one of the most uncomfortable situations and
Most raw
settings,
forms,
Yeah.
100%.
right?
Yeah.
But
100%.
people don't seem to understand that like those simple little things can have such a like drastic and impact on everything in your life together as a couple, right?
Yeah. It's something that everybody should work on. We
Mhm.
see this all the time, right? Where people become passionate about an aspect of their business or their life, and they really pour themselves into it. And then whenever they look at their relationship, yeah, they pour themselves into it, but it's almost like it's surface level. It's like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to kind of date my spouse, and I'm going to do the things that I need to because they've become so comfortable in their
Hmm.
relationship that they don't
Mhm.
really work on it on a deeper level. But if they were to pour those same energy and effort that they pour into all the other aspects of their life into learning how to do things like have an argument, or learning how to do things about how to
Yeah.
communicate their feelings, their wants, their needs, their desires, their fantasies, and everything in between,
Hmm.
like it would take their relationship where where it deserves to go.
I mean, I
Right.
honestly feel like our relationship grew when we started to then talk about these kinks and these
Yeah.
ideas and
Yep.
these. I mean, that was when we really bonded. I mean, we had both already been sexual, but we didn't immediately start out having these conversations. We've been together for 14 years. It took
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
And but it did come with the want. Both of us wanted to start having these discussions. And it's funny because as you start opening up and communicating and talking about like sexual desires or things that you want, you find that you open up in other places too, because
Mhm.
maybe you have this kink, right? Being spanked and tied up. Well, why do you want to be spanked? Why do you want to be tied up? And that opened up conversations for me and him to explore further into the emotions behind those things, which
Mhm.
really, what I believe is what brought us together even further. It's funny,
Okay.
like you open up your relationship and it actually ends up bringing y'all closer. And so it
Right.
was a beautiful thing to be able to do that.
So are you guys, I mean, like you said, you've been together a long time, you're married. Through having these conversations together, did you guys actually open up your relationship?
So it is like it's one of those like tricky things. We kind of like
So
figure it out
that's
as we go. We don't want to have any like labels to it. We are open into meeting people, and if you drive with us, fantastic. We can explore what that might mean.
Okay.
Now we do have hard no's. We have our list of like yes, maybe, and no. Right, like
Yep.
100% no for Casey would be like him and another guy, right? No matter
Yep.
how bad I wanted it, that would be a no. I don't, but no matter how bad I wanted it, that's a no for him. And I would always respect that. So I would say, in a sense, like, no, we're not as open as people would think when you give the term open, but
Mhm.
I don't think we've ever been like, oh, no, that's not for us. We're going to be closed off to it. We're very open to exploring every possibility and then
Right.
just kind of letting it happen naturally versus it being a little bit more forced.
yeah.
Okay. Yep.
I mean, well put. You know, we have a whole backstory behind this. You know, again, together for a long time,
Hmm.
right? And so we started evolving our conversations into fantasies. You know,
Hmm.
what are
Mhm.
some things that you've thought about? What are some things that you really imagine? And Carrie and I are sitting at we're sitting at a restaurant one day, having shots tequila, just opening up to each other and having some fun. And Carrie, comes out to me. Uh,
Yeah, I had not really expressed my bisexuality to anyone. It was for me. I didn't really care. I didn't feel the need to express it.
Mhm.
Um, but it, what I mean, Mr. Tequila helped.
Yep.
But it also just became like, hey, we are there. We are at this point. Like
yeah,
it
Mhm.
came with trust. It came with comfortability, and I wanted to communicate that that hey, you know what? I'm bisexual, and
Yep.
and it was these urges that I had that I had always wanted to explore. And I think that that was probably the first thing that like catapulted us into this concept of being more sexually open was my desire. And you never really like, he never got upset by it. He never strayed from it. And then he didn't do the opposite thing where, which, not that he would do that, but you kind of get fearful of a guy like over sexualizing your bisexuality, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I bet you are bisexual. And you're just like, that
Yeah.
doesn't help. Like, that doesn't
And
turn
making
me
it
on. That,
about them, like, cool, now I get to
yeah,
have
correct.
threesomes, you
Yeah,
know?
yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
And he never did that. It was actually met with thank you. It met with gratitude. Thank you for telling me this. Thank you for opening up to me.
Mhm.
How do you seek to explore this? What are your goals from this? And then that's kind of what brought us into our first threesome, honestly,
yeah.
was him being very open to what I wanted and what my needs were.
Mhm.
But again, it did come with us communicating that over and over and kind of setting those boundaries and figuring out what that would look like for us.
Okay.
And doing so many things incorrectly the first time around.
100%, yes.
We went through this like a whole period of crossing boundaries and then like kind of butting heads about it and then resitting down and
Hmm.
revisiting those boundaries. And
Yeah.
it took us a while to actually get to a point where we were like, all right, we know how to communicate this.
Hmm.
We have our boundaries set. We've learned about like how to have these good arguments, how to be productive,
Hmm.
how to
Mhm.
talk
How to
about it.
listen.
And that allowed us to get to a position where we can be like, all right, so let's talk about what we'd be comfortable
Mhm.
with. Would we be
Yeah.
comfortable interacting with other genders? Would we be
Mhm.
comfortable, like, in what setting? What does that look like to us? So it's super important for anyone that has even played with the idea. And I'm going to talk to guys real quick. Don't go into anything about opening up your relationship thinking with your dick ever. Like,
Yeah.
all that's going to do is lead you down a terrible road of destroying your relationship.
Just disappointment,
Yeah,
really,
don't do it for
because
the
Mhm.
wrong reasons.
people think threesomes are just like immaculate. Everyone's coming together at the same time, and it's just so beautiful, and there's fluids, and everyone's laughing. Like, no,
Yeah.
like threesomes are complicated,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and I think, again, like, to answer your first question, that's exactly one of the reasons we wanted to do this, because when we started out, we didn't necessarily, there are playbooks out there, but we didn't like gravitate towards those. We're like,
Yeah.
we'll figure this out. And now that I do believe that we have, it's another thing that we want to share is, if
Yeah.
you are thinking about this, don't necessarily go in it to the way that we did, and we made our own mistakes, and we learned from those, and we've grown from that. So now let's get you figuring out a better route, and maybe like a quicker route into
Mhm.
doing this. And it's just to help and get other people to be just as open, because there's nothing wrong with being open. It's a great thing. It's a beautiful thing that you can do with someone. And the more we like normalize it, I honestly
Mhm.
think the better.
You know what I think, like, one of the most important things too is, like, I try to tell people, like, you don't have to being open doesn't mean you have to be polyamorous. It doesn't mean you have to be in an open relationship. It doesn't mean you have to be a swinger. It doesn't even mean that you have to be into anal or into bondage. Being open just means that you hold no judgment towards men and women in any sexual space in any
Mhm.
way
Hmm.
that suits them. It's your reservations aren't carrying forward, passing on that judgment towards other people who are in a place where they're comfortable to do those things.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's really what I think my thing that boils down to is, like, I might not be ever in a position where I want to be in an open relationship, but I think it's a very beautiful thing for those who are, if that's what works for them and it makes them happy. Because at the end of the day, that's really what it is about, is what is it that you need to feel fulfilled in your relationship? What is it that you need in a relationship to have intimacy? And how can you make that work with the person you're with? It's not about other people, what they want and their
Hmm.
expectations and their needs. It's solely about what works for you and how
Mhm.
can you achieve that in a comfortable, safe way with your partner, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely. That's the,
yeah.
well, honestly, like, very, very well put.
Hmm.
I think that going into and trying to open up your relationship and only considering the sexual side of things
Mhm.
is a, again, wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
Um, the emotional side always should be the first thing considered. The sexual gratification is a bonus.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the ability to bond on an emotional level with multiple human beings over a period of time is a really cool thing.
Oh yeah.
And polyamory, like you said, it's a fucking umbrella term.
Hmm.
It means
Mhm.
so many things, and so many relationship styles fall under the umbrella of polyamory.
Yeah.
So whenever we talk to people who are like, "Oh, you're polyamorous, therefore you both have girlfriends and boyfriends, and everybody's
Hmm.
fucking each other, and it's just this big orgy," and we're kind of like, no, that's the entirely wrong idea of what
Mhm.
poly in the first place even
Hmm.
represents as a whole structure.
Mhm.
So it's just, well said.
Yeah, and one
Yeah.
thing that we tell a lot of people too is like, they always say a baby doesn't make a relationship better, right? Well, neither does opening up.
Yeah.
If you do not have a solid foundation with your partner, opening
Mhm.
up is not the best solution starting out. And that was one thing that I always try to get people to understand is, if you're rocky, that's not gonna like
Mhm.
bring it back together. That can
Yeah.
actually just hinder it further. So make sure you and your partner have sat down and y'all have communicated exactly what it is that you're looking for together. And then also getting that consent to move forward with each act. I mean,
Yeah.
there have been times where we've broken it down to a partner, what is our yes no maybe with
Yeah.
in this
Mhm.
exact situation. And again, I mean, like you said earlier, communication is the biggest aspect of a relationship in all manage and in all ways. And
Yeah.
so if people can come together and sit down and figure this out, you can decide if it's for you or not. and not people thinking like, oh, I have to do this if I'm sex
Mhm.
positive. Like, no, you can be sex positive and just be with you and your partner.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. No, I like that. Right. And it is one of those things. And I like that you pointed out the fact that opening up the relationship will not fix things. If there's foundations that are cracked and broken and trust issues in the beginning, going down the road of opening up your relationship is just going to deepen those trust issues, creates more insecurities. And essentially,
Yeah,
I do think like people will split up if that's the route you go. You really have to have that foundation and that trust and, build that first before opening up the door to exploring different things in a safe way for each other, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
talk about adding weight to an already cracked foundation. Doing something like that
Mhm.
is just going to you have to have that solid foundation to start
Yeah.
with.
Hmm.
So yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So for long-term relationships, I mean, there's I think having a sexual conversation on like your first, second, third date with somebody before even getting into a relationship is very important. I know people think it's
Yeah.
very weird and it probably rubs some men and women the wrong way. Women take it as, well, that guy's a pervert. He wants to know how I like to get fucked. And we haven't even, gone out for our third date yet. Or vice versa, right? It can shut down a lot of, possibilities in dating. However, I do feel that there's a lot of people that get together in relationships and it'll be 2 months in, 3 months in, 4 months in, and they're still having that same like, well, he likes to do this and I'm not really comfortable, but like, or I'm really into this but he doesn't want to do that and he's very vanilla, but I want to explore these things. And I think that having those conversations in the beginning almost eliminates that struggle. However, most people don't, and that's just what we do. So for people who are in a long-term relationship, to navigate having those conversations in a way where both partners then can kind of actually get their fantasies and desires fulfilled, even if they're not into it, where do you guys, bridge that for couples? And where do you find the biggest gap to be where people cannot get on the same page?
Anal. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, I'm
I
just
could see
kidding.
that.
No, I mean, in all honesty, I would say the way that we started, when we started to dive in and figure out what it is that we wanted, I wrote a checklist. These are
Okay.
things that I'm interested in. These are the things that I like. And I do wish that we kind of had these conversations
Earlier on. Yeah.
earlier on. I really do. But
Hmm.
even again, as both being sex positive, it was not necessarily taboo, but it wasn't a conversation that
We
came
didn't know to
up.
have the
Yeah,
conversation
exactly.
at
Like
that
we were
point.
so
Hmm.
young, we didn't even think to do that. But it was probably when you were in your doctorate, when you were going through and getting his doctorate done. He was in a lot of school, he was gone all the time, and we had to find ways to communicate. We had to find ways to kind of like spice things up. And that's one thing with him, having a partner that's interested in always yes, like he's so good about
Hmm.
wanting to make us better and wanting to figure things out. But we just started with a simple checklist.
Okay.
I swear I went on Pinterest and looked up like sex kinks and sex fantasies and sex positions, and then wrote them down, and then almost just like exchanged notes, like, here you go, here's mine, and I'm gonna read yours, and then I'm gonna come out and we're gonna see like which ones are the same. But I don't, in all honesty, like as long as you're starting that conversation, there's
Yeah.
necessarily no right or wrong way, but definitely get some information first and figure out what you personally like, and then how to communicate that with your partner.
So I've got a couple of viewpoints on this one, and they're going to be hugely beneficial to anybody that listens to this. So like, perk up for a second. Whenever you start discussing with your partner about your fantasies, your interests, and all these kind of things, one of the biggest things that can pop up in a monogamous couple, especially like a in quote traditionally monogamous couple,
Hmm.
is jealousy over someone's fantasy. Maybe a guy sits down with his girlfriend or wife and was like, I've always fantasized about having a threesome, and she turns around and goes, yeah, the fuck you are, and gets mad about it, because it does happen to
Hmm.
couples. It's not all couples, but it does happen to some.
Oh
So if
yeah.
you can find a way to write out or write down your fantasies or acts that you might be into, in a safe way that doesn't appear as if you were the one writing it down, that's a positive. A good way to do that is to get an app that does it for you. There's two that we really
Hmm.
support. One is X Confessions, which is actually
Hmm.
an ethical porn site, but they came out with an app for couples, which is almost like the Tinder of sex acts. So you connect your phone to your account to your partner's account, and it'll pop up on your phone with a sex act. It could be something as simple as like blindfolded blowjob. It could be something as simple as like squirt play, a
Mhm.
ton of things. And you just swipe left or right, depending on if you're into it or not. On your
Golden
partner. Yeah.
showers. I mean, and if you are unaware of the term, it gives you this little like parentheses, and you can
Question mark
yeah,
box to,
and you
to
can
take a
click
look
on it,
at.
and it'll explain what the act is. There were some acts where I was like,
Oh.
I don't even know what that is, and but it's really cool because you're able to swipe right or left depending on if it's something that you
Yeah.
like, and if you both swipe that you both like it, then it'll pop up and say, hey, you both said that you want to do this, and then you can kind of start that conversation.
Yeah. So
Oh,
We
I'm
didn't
not.
have that app
interesting.
back
Yeah.
then, so I went to Pinterest, but whatever.
So she's
Yeah.
not sitting down with me and going, "Hey, listen, I've really been thinking about having a fantasizing about a gangbang," and me
Mhm.
turning around and going, "Okay, a lot to unpack there, but let's go into it." You would have a number of other men who are going to get
Yeah.
pissed about something like
Yeah.
that, instead of thinking about what their own fantasies might be around to
Mhm.
something similar.
Mhm.
Yeah, that
So,
app's a great idea,
yeah,
though.
so it
That's a
allows
great
you to
one.
like sit down and go, cool, we matched on this act. Let's talk about it.
Mhm.
What does that look like? How do we do this kind of thing? Let's fantasize about it. Because at the time, those are just fantasies and thoughts. They have not been converted to action. They have
Yeah.
not actually taken place within reality. They're still within this space where it's okay to play with it and mold it to whatever you think it could be. And then if the time comes and the mood's right, you go into it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I guess it takes away that kind of uncomfortable, like I have to say this to you face to face, and now I have to
Mhm.
watch to see your reaction on your face of like now all of a sudden you're looking at me like I'm a fucking whore because I just told you I
Yeah.
want,
Yeah.
three guys to come on my face, and you're like,
Yeah.
who the fuck did I marry? You know?
Exactly.
Right?
Right?
You're like, I can't even look at you anymore. So yeah, I like that. It's kind of like a fun little discreet way to kind of, get your
Yeah.
confessions of your fantasies out
Mhm.
there. But
Yeah,
that's
it
nice.
is a really cool one, and I recommend that to couples who are more newer to
Mhm.
talking about fantasy. For people that are already a little bit more experienced and okay with talking about it, our number one tip there is to create a zone of non-judgment.
Mhm.
Okay.
Get yourself so again it goes back to the three C's. If you can create an environment that's comfortable, whether that be out at a restaurant, drinking like over margaritas, or it's at home in your bedroom, or even like soaking together in the bathtub,
Mhm.
creating an environment and then just allowing yourself to release judgment. That's probably the hardest part of it, is
Right.
going in and being able to tell myself as we sit down, okay, I might hear something that makes me initially feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but if I'm going into a place where I can say, okay, take that, sit on it for just a second, understand that the emotional reaction I'm having is not my final resting place. It is
Okay.
just a quick reaction. Hold on to it for a second, and then work to like breathe and just try to let it go. That allows you to create this space where you can say to each other
Mhm.
anything that you want to,
Yeah, like,
and
baby, I want bukkake. How do you feel about that?
there you
You
go.
know? And he
Yeah.
might he might be like, "Whoa, whoa," but no, it's about expressing that too. And again, that's part of what made us grow is when we
Mhm.
started to express these, that's when we found out that we were getting closer and closer. And again, because it was met with no judgment,
Yeah.
and we just wanted to communicate. We just wanted to get to know each other in a way that the first 6 years of our marriage we didn't,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I like that. So do you think and do you find I want to hear the like a male perspective on this because I very rarely get to, hear men talk about this. Do you think that men, and I mean women as well, cheat because they have sexual desires and fantasies that are not being met?
Hmm. So it sounds like what you're asking me is, why do men cheat?
Well,
What the
I
hell?
mean, I
Those
know women
bastards.
do it, and I know why we do, and I mean, like, I know why I've been pushed to the brink of it, and I think typically that's a lack of an emotional connection in my relationship where I feel like then at that point it's like I'm searching for attention, just in general in conversation, and then emotionally I can get attracted to
Mhm.
somebody because I'm lacking that at home, and then that's when like the sexual kind of turns on kind of come. But I mean, I know men kind of compartmentalize things a lot differently than
Yeah.
women do when it comes to those things.
Yeah. I think that you are right. Men do compartmentalize things. But I think that what occurs in a man that does cheat, fortunately, I don't have personal experience in this area because
Mhm.
I've never cheated on anyone. But from what the conversation that I have with men, the look that I can see is that I think that a number of men have a skewed sexual narrative. they have this idea of what their sex life should look like. They have
Mhm.
an idea of what they want their sex life to look like. But because as men we are repressed in our own
Mhm.
expression and told that we should repress these feelings, that they don't come out and they fester. And then whenever we get into a relationship where some of those sexual needs are being met, but we still have these other side of fantasies and we don't have an avenue to express them
Yeah.
specifically with our partners, we look for other avenues. And if the opportunity arises and the ingredients are there and the timing is right, it can lead to somebody engaging with another person and cheating.
Okay. I like that. Yeah. Do you want to weigh in on that? Do you have a different perspective as to why you think that
I mean,
men cheat?
I do think it has a lot to do with the fact that they don't know how to express or communicate. I mean, I'm lucky. I have a man that forces me to communicate. I'm the
Mhm.
one that was like, no, like you don't get to know that about me. But I
Mhm.
mean, I do think it has a lot to do with that, like assumed masculinity. And so if you're going to express how you feel, then they just rather not. And it's
Mhm.
easier for them to sometimes push their emotion sides into something more physical and something more tangible because that's what they know, that's what they relate to the most. Um, I mean, I have had a lot of conversations with women that their spouses did cheat, and unfortunately, yes, a lot of it did have to do with sex.
Mhm.
And I think that that's also just not expressing what their needs are. Anyone has the capability to cheat, and 9 times out of 10, it comes from just lack of communication.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
what are we told growing up as men? Like what's the message overall? Men cheat.
Mm. Yeah.
Like that is the message across the board. It's someone that's been there for years and years and years. And at one point, it was entirely okay for that to happen.
At one
Yeah, that's
point,
true.
we
You're
just
right.
got to where it's not
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. No,
So,
that's true.
that's the
Hmm.
fucking message that guys are told is like men
Mhm.
cheat, and then you listen to some of these personalities. I won't name names, but you listen to social personalities who are like men have needs and they deserve to be able to get what they want when they want it, and women should be submissive, and we're gonna and you go, well, no fucking wonder why some of these guys have this idea is because they're being misled by
Hmm.
false authorities who are claiming that they're things like an alpha male and doing all this bullshit and spreading it around through their PR team, and it just comes crashing down into a clusterfuck of men thinking they can do whatever they want whenever they want, and it's just the natural order of things.
Yeah. No, you're not
But
wrong
we're
on
gonna
that, and
break
you
that,
do
aren't
hear
we,
that.
girl?
Yes, we are.
We
One
gonna break that
conversation
shit right
at a
now.
time. Yes, absolutely. I agree. And I grew up with, and I heard used to hear this from guy friends all the time that because I was always so open with my sexuality and like, you know, very, the one in the group that it was like, oh, she'll do this, blah blah blah, or dress like that way and talk that way. And then I had friends who used to always tell me, men, it's like they marry the housewife, but you fuck the whore. Like the
Yeah,
Betty
Mhm.
Veronica thing. Like you marry, I can't remember which way it was, but it was essentially you marry Veronica, but you fuck Betty. And
yeah,
like, I was just like, well, why can't it be both? Why can't a guy want to marry the woman who is a freak in the bedroom, but also can cook and clean and raise their children with morals and values? Like, why does it have to be separate that you can't get
Yeah.
what you want out of, a
One
sexual fulfilling
individual.
relation? Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
that just, I always found it such a disturbing concept of like, so it was always the men know if a man's in love with a woman and he has an emotional connection, he doesn't want to treat her like a whore in the bedroom. And it's so that's why it's like they had to go out and do their disgusting fantasies and all these things with some slut on the side, and then they came
Mhm.
home and they just loved their wife. Well, why
yeah,
can't you have that? Why can't your wife be the person that you are so turned on by, that you want to fulfill these fantasies? Why does she just have to be the person doing your laundry and making you supper? But
yeah,
I grew up being told that, and my guy friends would always, reiterate it to me. Well, you're not going to find a husband if you keep fucking people on the first date and things like that. And I'm like, but I want to have sex and I want to experience these things. Why can't a guy love me for being open sexually? I don't cheat. I've never cheated. I want to do these things with the person that I love. And they're like, no, no, guys don't
Correct.
like to do that,
yeah.
you know?
No,
Not the
So,
right guys.
not and like
yeah.
first, like, so my that's oh man, that is such a thing to unpack right there, because whenever we look at like the guys that want that duality, or they think that they
Mhm.
can't have it, that's utter bullshit.
You just
Um,
got to work for it,
yeah,
man. Help
put
that bitch in the kitchen
Yeah.
cooking, and then maybe you will get a little slut in the bedroom, you know?
Right?
or
Like,
Yeah.
do what I like to do. I'm hugely attracted to power and pushback.
Mhm.
I'm not a big fan of like the submissive housewife that is going to agree with everything you say and do everything that you want. I'm not a fan.
Mhm.
I really love, that's one of the things that attracted me to Carrie in the first place, is that was always like the female friends that I had, and
mhm,
the people that I dated. It was all like almost like an exchange of power,
Mhm.
in gaining each other's respect. That was one of the things that me and Carrie did so well, is that we worked hard to gain each other's respect. If we disagree with each other, we're going to let each other know it, and we're going to have a conversation about it. But
Mhm.
that dynamic allows us to have a
mhm.
successful career wife who
Yeah.
loves to get kinky in the bedroom with
Yeah. Like
with
I said, I'm
myself.
I would I'm actually better suited getting kiki in the kitchen and chilling in the bedroom, you know? But I
Yeah.
think I think it's about finding that, right? And
Yeah.
I will say I got very lucky. I know that I did. Like my husband does have very unique view, not unique views, but different out of the standard views for
Mhm.
men. And especially, you know, like I said earlier, we're in Texas, we're super conservative. Like all I hear are women that complain about the exact same thing that you're talking about. And I think it's
Mhm.
unfortunate. I really do. And I think that the more that we try to get this message out there, unfortunately, I think it's men that are hurting in this more than anything. They're not
Mhm.
realizing that they can get the slut housewife. They're not
Yeah.
realizing that because they've never really dove into the fact or put in the work to get
Right.
both.
Yeah.
He puts in the work to get both.
Mhm.
And I think that that comes with a lot of respect and him being humble and just first of all just a good fucking human being. Yeah, that
Right.
helps. But again, I think if we're able to get this message out more and tell guys like you need to get up with the times. That's not how it
Yeah.
is anymore. This is the 50s. Like buck the fuck up and realize where you're lacking as an individual. And then, you know, maybe all this nonsense of men that cheat more will just fucking go away finally, you know, because it has
Yeah.
to at some point.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree. And I do think, and I think that's what I love. I love that you guys are a female male team and sharing the message from experience, but also for that male perspective, because I feel like that is kind of what men are missing is you can listen to women talk about sex all day long, but doesn't mean that they're going to change their mind or perspective because they're not hearing it from an open perspective of another male figure
Exactly.
and
Yeah,
realizing, well, this couple has this, they have this relationship, they seem very happy and fulfilled, and it has stemmed from the growth of in your relationship together. And oh, maybe I can have that. Maybe there is something I need to open up and have a conversation with my wife about. Maybe I need to dive in and asking her what her wants and needs are they being fulfilled, are they being met? And
Mhm.
so for you being able to share that message with the men that listen and together, I think that is actually a really beneficial thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
So
thank
it's
you.
one of the things that we strive to do. And I
mhm.
mean, have that goal of, we have a relationship that shatters all traditional gender roles. We
Yeah.
have a relationship that
Mhm.
is fulfilling, that
Mhm.
Yeah.
is filled with sex. Like we have two kids at the ages of 14 and 9 years old, and we have sex all the fucking time.
All the time.
like,
Mhm.
so we have this super satisfying sex life,
Mhm.
and it stems from the fact that we chose the relationship style that we wanted based
Yeah.
upon the needs of me myself and the wants of myself, as well as the needs of Carrie and the wants
Well,
of
yeah, and
Carrie.
how we communicated what we wanted.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have guys that are told all the time that like with the only way to be happy in a relationship is through traditional gender roles and the certain one type of relationship style. And the fact is that you need to find the relationship style that best fits you, and then
Yeah.
find a partner that coincides with that,
Mhm.
that y'all mesh together, instead of trying to force someone into a box that they don't fit into.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I like that. Thank you. And you know what? I appreciate that you guys were able to come on and share with everybody that, tunes in and listens. And I'm very appreciative of what you guys put out there as well of the information. I find it very educational and beneficial.
Thank you.
For everybody listening, where can they find you guys? What's your website? Where's the information? When do your episodes go live? Give us all the
Yeah.
details.
Okay, here we go. So you can find us. Instagram is our primary channel that we use. You can
Okay.
find us at Come with KC there. TikTok, Come with KC as well. You can
Mhm.
email us. This is our favorite thing. Is
And real quick, Come with Casey is CUM with K and then a C. It's not spelled out KC. It's a K
Okay.
and a C.
yeah,
So come with
Carrie and Casey.
KC. Yeah.
Okay.
Carrie and Casey.
So we have that. You can drop us a line, come with Casey at gmail.com for now. Our website is launching actually in the next quarter. We're wanting to make sure everything is up to par with all of
Mm-hmm.
our coaching availability,
Mhm.
workshops, and all of our content that goes on there. We don't want to just give you guys
A blank
a
page.
landing page with
For
like
Yeah.
sure.
a bio on it, right? We
Mhm.
want it to
Yeah.
have some sort of viability. So we're going to be launching that next quarter. Outside of that,
No, I
I
think you kind of
think
named
that
them
is
all.
our. I think that's
Okay.
our primary for the time being.
Perfect. And you guys have new episodes go live every Friday?
Mhm.
So yes, season 2 of Come with Casey starts this coming Friday.
Okay.
We typically release the episodes at midnight. We finished season 1 back in mid-December,
Mhm.
I believe.
Nice.
So we're getting started with that. So season 2, episode 1 drops this coming Friday.
Yeah, and that's on every podcast platform that there is.
Okay.
Anywhere that you
Yeah.
stream it, you can get the audio, and then you'll be able to get the video version of it on YouTube from our channel, Come with KC. So anybody that goes over and hits that subscribe button is going to be
Yep.
able to have our beautiful faces on their screen.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all the information, and we will be sure to include everything in the show notes for everybody to also easy access and links. I'm very grateful that you guys are doing what you guys are doing. I just love that more people are having these conversations. They're putting the messages out there. And I find like through doing this myself, it's like you realize that there is other people normalizing these conversations as well. And yet everybody still has their own little twist or perspective, and everybody resonates with people in a different way, so it's just so amazing that more and more people are having these conversations, and hopefully it will just eventually break down all of those social stigmas and those walls for people to just you know be okay with it.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to do. And thank you so much for having us on.
yeah, of course. Like I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I mean, like, I love the dynamic that you guys have. And I love that, like you had a few different perspectives and like viewpoints on things, which is really nice because there's different listeners that have different viewpoints and perspectives. And, it really does cater to the males that listen as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
For sure. We're happy to help spread that message.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. You guys stay tuned for what's coming next week. And I'll let you guys know when it goes live and you guys can share and I'll have it on our page. We usually do it for about a week. So
Okay, cool.
awesome.